The Alpha King returns after 18 years to see his ex Luna and freezes at what he sees. The autumn wind swept through the dense forests of northern Maine, carrying with it the scent of pine and damp earth. Marcus Blackwood stood at the edge of the clearing, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel of his old pickup truck. 18 years had passed since he'd last set foot in this town. 18 years since he'd walked away from everything he'd built, everything he'd loved. The weight of those years pressed against his chest like a stone. He'd been young then, barely 25, driven by ambition and a hunger to prove himself. As the head of the largest logging company in the region, people had looked up to him, called him the king of the North Woods. But power had a price, and Marcus had paid it with the one thing that mattered most: his family. If you're watching this story unfold, subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're from. We'd love to hear from you. The town of Pine Haven hadn't changed much. The same weathered storefronts lined Main Street. The same mountains rose in the distance like silent sentinels. But Marcus had changed. The confident young man who'd left had been replaced by someone older, quieter, carrying the burden of choices that couldn't be undone. Elena. Her name still caught in his throat after all these years. She'd been his everything, his partner, his anchor, the woman who'd seen past his rough edges to the man underneath. They'd married young, built a life together in a modest house at the edge of town. She'd supported his dreams even when it meant long nights and longer absences. And then, when success finally came, when the company grew beyond anything they'd imagined, Marcus had made the choice that shattered everything. He'd accepted a partnership opportunity in Seattle, a chance to expand nationwide. Elena had been 8 months pregnant with their second child, their daughter Lily just 3 years old. She'd begged him to wait, to stay until the baby came, to think about what mattered. But Marcus had been blind to everything except his vision of empire. He'd promised to return in a month, 2 at most. He'd promised so many things. The month had turned into 3, then 6, then a year. Business consumed him, dragged him deeper into a world of contracts and negotiations, and endless flights to cities he barely remembered. When he'd finally come back, the house had been empty. Elena had filed for divorce, moved away, taken the children. His lawyer had delivered the papers with a note in Elena's careful handwriting. "You made your choice. Now live with it." Marcus had signed without contest. What right did he have to fight? He'd abandoned them when they needed him most. He'd sent money over the years, generous support that was accepted without acknowledgement, but never received a word in return. His letters went unanswered. His calls unreturned. He'd convinced himself it was better that way, that they'd moved on and found happiness without him. But now, something had pulled him back. Maybe it was the restlessness that had grown in his chest over the past year, the hollow feeling that no amount of success could fill. Maybe it was the heart attack that had nearly killed him 6 months ago, leaving him staring at a hospital ceiling and wondering what he'd actually accomplished. Or maybe it was simply time to face what he'd run from, to see with his own eyes what had become of the family he'd lost. He pulled up to the old address, his heart hammering. The house looked different, better maintained, with fresh paint, and a garden that hadn't been there before. A new mailbox stood at the road's edge, and Marcus noticed the name had changed. Not Blackwood anymore, but something else. Thompson. Elena had remarried. The realization hit him like a physical blow, though he had no right to feel betrayed. Of course she'd moved on. 18 years was a lifetime. She deserved happiness, deserved someone who would actually be there. He sat in the truck for a long moment, wondering if he should just leave, spare everyone the discomfort of this reunion. Before he could decide, the front door opened. A young man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and features that made Marcus's breath catch. His son. The baby Elena had been carrying when he left was now a grown man, 18 years old. standing on the porch with a basketball under his arm. Marcus climbed out of the truck slowly, his legs unsteady. The young man stopped, squinting across the yard. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Elena," Marcus said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Elena Thompson." The young man's expression shifted, something guarded entering his eyes. "Who's asking?" Before Marcus could answer, another voice called from inside the house. "Jake, who is it?" Then she appeared in the doorway, and Marcus forgot how to breathe. Elena stood backlit by the warm glow of the house, and for a moment, time collapsed. She looked almost exactly as he remembered. The same graceful bearing, the same dark hair, though now threaded with silver. But there was something else. Something that made his heart stop, and his mind struggle to process what he was seeing. She was in a wheelchair. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Elena's eyes met his across the yard, and he watched recognition dawn in them, followed quickly by something harder, something that might have been anger or pain, or both. Marcus. His name on her lips sounded like an accusation and a question all at once. Jake's head snapped toward him, eyes widening. "You're Marcus Blackwood? You're my—" He couldn't seem to finish the sentence. Elena wheeled herself forward onto the porch, one hand raised toward Jake. "It's all right, honey. Go inside for a minute." "Mom? Please, Jake." The young man hesitated, shooting Marcus a look that contained 18 years of questions and resentment, then disappeared into the house. Marcus stood frozen, unable to reconcile the vital, energetic woman he remembered with the reality before him. What happened? The words burst from him before he could stop them. "Elena, what? What are you doing here, Marcus?" Her voice was steady, controlled, revealing nothing. After 18 years, what could you possibly want? He took a step closer, then stopped, unsure if he had the right to approach. "I needed to see you, to see the kids. I know I have no right to be here, but—" "You're right. You don't." Elena's hands gripped the wheels of her chair, her knuckles white. "You left when I needed you most. You weren't there when Jake was born. You weren't there for his first steps, his first words, his first day of school. You weren't there when Lily cried herself to sleep, asking why her daddy didn't love her anymore." Each word was a knife, precisely placed. Marcus absorbed them, knowing he deserved worse. "I know. God, Elena, I know. I was a fool. I was selfish and blind, and I've regretted it every single day since. Regret doesn't change anything." Her eyes glittered with unshed tears, but her voice remained firm. "It doesn't give my children back their father. It doesn't—" She stopped abruptly, shaking her head. "Why now? Why come back now?" "I almost died," Marcus said quietly. "Heart attack. When I was lying in that hospital, I realized I'd spent 18 years building an empire and had absolutely nothing that mattered. No one who cared if I lived or died. And I thought maybe, if I could just see you all, see that you were okay, maybe I could find some peace with the choices I made." Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Peace? You want peace. You abandoned your pregnant wife and your toddler daughter to chase money and success. You missed everything that mattered. And now you show up looking for peace? What happened to you?" Marcus asked again, his eyes dropping to the wheelchair. "Please, Elena, tell me what happened." For a long moment she said nothing. Then with a heavy sigh, she answered, "Car accident. 5 years ago. Drunk driver ran a red light, hit me broadside, shattered my spine. The doctor said I was lucky to survive." The guilt crashed over Marcus like a wave. If he'd been there, if he'd been the husband he should have been, would she have been in that car at that moment? Would things have been different? Don't, Elena said sharply, reading his expression. Don't you dare make this about you. I've built a good life despite everything, despite you. I have amazing kids, a career I love teaching at the community college, friends who showed up when I needed them. I don't need your pity or your guilt. I'm not offering pity, Marcus said. I'm offering. I don't even know what I'm offering. An apology that could never be enough. A chance to know my children if they'd even want that. A way to help, if you'd let me. Help? Elena's voice rose slightly. Where were you when I needed help? When I was working 2 jobs to keep us afloat after you left? When Jake had pneumonia and I sat up with him for 3 nights straight? When Lily was being bullied at school and needed her father to tell her she was strong and worthy? Where were you when I was learning to live in this chair? Fighting through months of physical therapy, trying to figure out how to be a single parent when I couldn't even walk? Marcus had no answer. There was no answer that would suffice. The front door opened again, and a young woman stepped out. Lily. Marcus would have known her anywhere. She had Elena's eyes, his dark hair, and a fierce expression that reminded him of both of them. She was beautiful and strong, and utterly unfamiliar to him. Mom, are you okay? Lily moved to stand beside Elena's chair, one protective hand on her mother's shoulder. Her eyes fixed on Marcus with open hostility. Who is this? Lily, Elena said softly. This is Marcus, your father. Lily's expression hardened further. I don't have a father. I have a mother who raised me, and a brother who was there for me, and a stepfather who actually showed up. This is just some stranger who shares my DNA. The words cut deep, but Marcus couldn't argue with them. He was a stranger. He'd given up the right to be called father the day he'd chosen business over family. I deserve that, Marcus said quietly. You're absolutely right. I haven't earned the title of father. But I'd like the chance to try, if you'd give it to me. Not to replace anyone or demand forgiveness. Just to be present. To know you. Lily looked at Elena, silently asking for guidance. Elena's expression was complicated, emotions warring across her face. Finally she spoke. That's not my decision to make anymore. You're both adults now. If you want to get to know him, that's your choice. But I won't force it or encourage it. Jake had reappeared in the doorway, listening to the exchange. I've got questions, he said abruptly. A lot of questions. If you want to be here, if you want to try, then you're going to answer them. All of them. And you're going to tell us the truth. Marcus nodded, relief and terror mixing in his chest. Anything. Whatever you want to know. Not here, Elena said firmly. Not at my home. If you're going to do this, do it somewhere else. I need space from this. There's a diner downtown, Lily said, her tone still cold. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. If you're serious about this, you'll be there. I'll be there, Marcus promised. As he turned to leave, Elena called his name. He looked back, and she met his eyes with a gaze that held decades of pain and strength. Marcus, one thing you should know. That man I married, Robert Thompson, he was there through everything. The accident, the recovery, raising the kids. He treated them like his own, loved them unconditionally. He died 2 years ago. Cancer. And in the 10 years we were together, he was more of a father to Jake and Lily than you ever were. So if you're here, thinking you can waltz back in and claim some kind of position in this family, you're wrong. You'll have to earn every inch of ground, and even then, you might not get anywhere. Marcus swallowed hard, nodding. I understand, and I'm sorry about Robert, truly. He sounds like a good man. The kind of man I should have been. He drove back to the motel he'd booked on the edge of town, his mind churning with everything he'd seen and heard. Elena in a wheelchair, his children grown and rightfully angry, a life that had continued without him, shaped by his absence in ways he was only beginning to comprehend. That night, Marcus barely slept. He lay in the narrow motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling and replaying the encounter over and over. Elena's strength amazed him. Even after everything she'd been through, she carried herself with a dignity and grace that made him ashamed of his own weakness all those years ago. The next morning, he arrived at the diner 15 minutes early. It was a classic American establishment. Red vinyl booths, a long counter with spinning stools, and the smell of coffee and bacon thick in the air. He chose a booth near the window and ordered coffee, watching the street outside as his stomach twisted with anxiety. Jake arrived first, alone, sliding into the booth across from Marcus with a guarded expression. "Lily's coming. She's just parking." "Thank you for giving me this chance," Marcus said. Jake didn't respond, just studied him with an intensity that was unnerving. When Lily arrived a few minutes later, she sat next to her brother, presenting a united front. They'd clearly discussed this, decided how they would approach this meeting. "So," Jake said once they'd ordered, "let's start with the obvious question. Why did you leave?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Because I was young and stupid, and thought success meant money and power. I'd grown up poor, worked my way up from nothing, and when the opportunity came to expand the business, I thought it was the most important thing in the world. I thought providing financially was the same as being a good husband and father." "That's a cop-out," Lily said flatly. "Plenty of people work hard and still show up for their families." "You're right. It is a cop-out. The truth is, I was scared. Your mother and I, we got married young. We had you, Lily, when we were barely more than kids ourselves. And then Jake was on the way, and I felt this enormous pressure to provide, to build something that would keep you all safe and comfortable. But underneath that, I think I was terrified of failing as a father. My own dad was absent, drunk most of the time when he was around. I didn't have a model for how to do it right." "So you just didn't do it at all?" Jake's voice was sharp. "I told myself I was doing it for you. That working hard, building the business, making money, that was how I showed love. But I was lying to myself. The real reason I stayed away was that work was easier than family. I knew how to cut timber, negotiate contracts, manage employees. I didn't know how to change diapers, or comfort a crying child, or be present for someone else's needs. So I hid in what I was good at." The honesty seemed to catch them off guard. Lily's expression softened slightly, though wariness remained. "Did you ever think about us, when you were gone?" "Every day," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "I thought about you constantly. I told myself I'd come back soon, that I'd make it up to you. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months. And the longer I stayed away, the harder it became to come back. I knew I'd destroyed everything, and I couldn't face what I'd done." "Mom cried a lot," Jake said quietly. "When I was little, I remember hearing her at night, after she thought we were asleep. She tried to hide it from us, but I knew." The guilt was a physical pain in Marcus's chest. "I'm so sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Your mother deserved so much better than what I gave her. You both did." "She's the strongest person I know," Lily said, her voice fierce. After the accident, the doctors said she might never regain any mobility below the waist. But she fought through physical therapy, adapted everything in her life. She taught herself to drive with hand controls, modified the house, went back to work within a year. All while making sure we were okay, that we felt secure and loved. "She always was strong," Marcus said softly. "That strength is what attracted me to her in the first place. She had this core of steel wrapped in kindness. I'm not surprised she survived what happened. I'm just devastated that she had to go through it alone." "She wasn't alone," Jake corrected. "She had Robert. He moved in after the accident, took care of all of us. He drove me to basketball practice, helped Lily with her homework, made sure Mom got to her therapy appointments. He was there. The comparison hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Marcus nodded slowly. I'm glad she had someone. Truly. Tell me about him. Over the next hour, Jake and Lily painted a picture of Robert Thompson, a high school English teacher who'd been Elena's colleague. A quiet man with a gentle sense of humor, who'd fallen in love with Elena's strength and resilience. He'd proposed a year after the accident, not to save her, but because he genuinely loved her and the kids. He'd been steady, reliable, present for all the moments that mattered. He came to every one of my basketball games, Jake said, a hint of emotion cracking through his careful control. Even the away games that were hours away. He'd sit in the stands with Mom, cheering louder than anyone. He taught me to drive, Lily added, and when I had my first heartbreak, he sat with me on the porch and told me about his first love and how he survived it. He made me feel like my pain was valid, like I'd get through it. With each story, Marcus felt the weight of his absence more acutely. These were the moments he'd missed, the small but crucial experiences that built the foundation of a family. He'd sent money, paid for basketball camps and driving lessons and college funds, but he'd missed the actual living. How did he die? Marcus asked gently. Pancreatic cancer, Jake said. By the time they caught it, it was stage 4. He only lived 6 months after diagnosis. But even then, he was thinking about us. He made sure all his affairs were in order, recorded video messages for Lily and me to watch at important milestones. Graduation, wedding, first kid. He wanted to still be there, even when he couldn't be. The contrast was devastating. Robert Thompson had faced death and still found ways to be present for the future. Marcus had faced nothing more challenging than his own fear and selfishness, and he'd fled. I can't compete with that, Marcus said quietly. And I'm not trying to. I can't undo the past or replace what you had with Robert. All I can do is tell you the truth. I made terrible choices. I abandoned you when you needed me. I have no excuses that make it better. But I'd like the chance to know you now, if you're willing. Not as your father, if you don't want that. Maybe just as someone who cares. Someone who wants to be part of your lives, however small that part might be. Jake and Lily exchanged a look, that silent communication that siblings develop. Finally, Lily spoke. We're not going to call you Dad. That doesn't feel right. I understand. And we're not going to pretend the past didn't happen, or that everything is fine now, Jake added. I wouldn't want you to. But, Lily continued, we're willing to try. To get to know you, see if there's something worth building. No promises, no guarantees. Just trying. Relief flooded through Marcus, so intense it was almost dizzying. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. They talked for another hour, the conversation gradually shifting from the painful past to more neutral ground. Marcus learned that Jake was studying engineering at the state university, that he'd earned a basketball scholarship, and was considering trying for the professional leagues. Lily was in her senior year of high school, planning to study environmental science, passionate about conservation and protecting the forests that surrounded their town. Ironic, Marcus said with a sad smile. I spent my career cutting down forests, and my daughter wants to save them. Not ironic, Lily corrected. Necessary. Someone needs to fix the damage. The words stung, but Marcus nodded. She was right, of course. About more than just the trees. As they prepared to leave, Jake hesitated. There's something else you should know. Mom acts tough, but this has been hard on her. Seeing you again stirred up a lot of stuff she thought she'd dealt with. She might not show it, but she's hurting. I never wanted to hurt her, Marcus said. Not again. Then maybe you should talk to her, Lily suggested. Really talk. Not about us, but about what happened between you two. She deserves closure, even if it's just knowing why you really left. Over the next few weeks, Marcus slowly, carefully began to build a tentative connection with his children. He attended one of Jake's basketball games, sitting far in the back, not wanting to intrude, and felt his heart swell with pride watching his son move across the court with grace and power. He met Lily for coffee and listened as she explained her passion for environmental restoration, her dream of developing sustainable forestry practices that would protect ecosystems while still supporting local economies. "You know," she said one afternoon, her tone slightly less hostile than before, "if you actually cared about making amends, you could use your resources for something good. Your company still exists, right? You could push for better practices, reforestation programs, conservation initiatives." Marcus had never considered it before, but the idea took root. What if he could take the empire he'd built, the thing he'd sacrificed his family for, and transform it into something that actually helped? Not as absolution for his sins, but as a way to create something positive from the wreckage of his choices. He started researching, making calls, consulting with experts in sustainable forestry. The work energized him in a way nothing had in years. For the first time, he saw a path forward that wasn't just about profit or success, but about legacy. Real legacy, not just money in a bank account. But through it all, Elena remained distant. She was polite when they crossed paths. Pinehaven was too small a town to completely avoid each other, but she kept a careful wall between them. Marcus respected that boundary, even as part of him ached to talk to her, to truly explain and apologize. One cold November evening, 6 weeks after his return, Marcus received a text from an unknown number. It was Elena. "Can you come by the house tomorrow evening? 7 p.m., just you." His hand shook as he typed back, "I'll be there." He arrived exactly on time, nervous as a teenager on a first date. Elena answered the door herself, gesturing for him to come in. The house was warm and inviting, filled with evidence of the life that had continued without him. Photos on the walls showing Jake and Lily growing up, artwork that must have been Lily's, a bookshelf crammed with well-worn volumes. Elena led him to the living room, positioning her wheelchair to face the couch where he sat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "The kids tell me you've been meeting with them," Elena finally said. "That you're trying." "I am. They're remarkable, Elena. You raised remarkable children." "We raised them," she corrected quietly. "You might not have been there, but your absence shaped them too. They're so independent and self-reliant because they had to be. They're protective of me because they saw me struggle and fought to help. Every part of who they are came from our story, the good and the bad." Marcus nodded, accepting the truth of it. "I asked you here because I need to understand something," Elena continued. "Not for the kids, for me. I need to know if you ever loved me, really loved me, or if I was just convenient. Someone to come home to while you built your empire." The question hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. "God, Elena, of course I loved you. I've never stopped loving you." "Then why?" Her voice cracked slightly. "If you loved me, why was it so easy to leave? Why did business matter more than being there when our son was born? Why did you choose everything else over us?" Marcus took a shaky breath, knowing that this was the moment where he had to be completely honest, even if the truth made him look worse. "Because I didn't think I was enough. You were so good, so pure and kind and strong. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. And when the baby was coming, when our family was growing, I looked at you and I panicked. I thought about my own father, how he'd failed us, how he'd been absent even when he was present. And I was terrified I'd be the same way, that I'd let you down, that I'd ruin our children the way my father had ruined me." He stood up, pacing to the window. "So when the Seattle opportunity came, I grabbed it. I told myself it was about providing for you, but really, it was about running away from my fear of failing you. And then, when I'd been gone for a while and I started to see what I'd actually done, I was too much of a coward to face it. It was easier to stay away, to send money and convince myself that was enough, than to come back and see the damage I'd caused. Elena was silent, tears streaming down her face. "You broke my heart," she whispered. "I loved you so much, and you just vanished, like we meant nothing." "You meant everything," Marcus said, his own tears falling now. "You were everything, and I destroyed it because I was weak and scared and selfish. There's nothing I can do to take back those 18 years, Elena. Nothing I can say that makes it better. But I need you to know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. Not losing the family in some abstract sense, but losing you. Your smile, your laugh, the way you'd look at me like I was worth something. I've spent 18 years trying to fill the hole you left, and nothing has even come close." She wiped her eyes, struggling to compose herself. "I was so angry with you for so long. After the accident, when I was lying in that hospital bed learning I'd never walk again, all I could think about was how you weren't there. How you'd never been there when I needed you. And I hated you for it. I hated you so much." "You had every right to," Marcus said. "But hating you was exhausting," Elena continued. "It took too much energy I needed for healing and raising the kids and rebuilding my life. So I let it go. Or I thought I did. And then you showed up on my doorstep, and all those feelings came flooding back. The anger, the hurt, but also the memories of what we had before everything fell apart. The good parts." She looked up at him, her expression vulnerable. "I don't know what to do with that, Marcus. I don't know how to reconcile the man who left me with the man I fell in love with. I don't know if there's space in my life for you, or if I even want there to be." Marcus moved back to the couch, sitting on the edge. "I'm not asking for space in your life, Elena. I'm not asking for another chance or forgiveness or anything like that. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. And if there's anything I can do to make things even slightly better, not for me, but for you, I'll do it." They talked long into the night, excavating the ruins of their relationship, examining the pieces to understand how something that had started with so much love had ended in such pain. It wasn't comfortable or easy, but it was necessary. They discussed the early days of their marriage, the dreams they'd shared, the moment when things had started to fracture. "I should have fought harder," Elena admitted. "When you said you were leaving for Seattle, I should have put my foot down, demanded you stay, or told you not to bother coming back. But I was trying to be supportive, trying to be the good wife who believed in her husband's dreams. I didn't realize I was enabling you to run away. That's not on you," Marcus said firmly. "You were being loving and supportive. I was the one who took advantage of that, who twisted your kindness into permission to abandon my responsibilities." As midnight approached, exhaustion settled over both of them. Elena wheeled herself to the door, and Marcus followed. On the threshold, she looked up at him. "I can't promise anything, Marcus. I can't promise forgiveness or friendship or even peace between us, but I can promise honesty. If we're going to exist in each other's lives, even at a distance, we need to be honest about who we are and what we need." "I can do that," Marcus said. "Good. Because here's my truth. I don't hate you anymore. I don't love you either. Not the way I did. But I don't hate you, and that's something. Maybe eventually we can find a way to be. I don't know. Not friends, but not enemies either. Something in between." "I'll take it," Marcus said. "I'll take whatever you're willing to give." As winter settled over Pine Haven, Marcus found himself becoming a small but real part of his children's lives. He wasn't their father in the traditional sense. That role had been filled by Robert Thompson, and Marcus wouldn't presume to replace him. But he was present. He showed up to Jake's games, sat in the stands, and cheered. He met Lily for weekly coffee sessions where she taught him about forest ecology, and he listened, really listened, to her passion and ideas. He also began implementing changes in his company, much to the shock of his board of directors. He initiated a comprehensive reforestation program, pledging to plant 3 trees for every one harvested. He funded research into sustainable logging practices and partnered with environmental organizations to identify and protect old-growth forests. The work was expensive and complicated, but it felt right, like he was finally using his resources for something meaningful. Lily was cautiously impressed. "It's a start," she said, when he showed her the initial plans. "Not enough to undo the damage, but a start." "I know it doesn't make up for anything," Marcus said, "but maybe it can be part of building something better going forward." Elena heard about the changes through the kids, and one day in early December, she invited Marcus to dinner. Not alone, Jake and Lily would be there too. But it was the first time she'd voluntarily included him in a family setting. The dinner was awkward at first, everyone uncertain of the boundaries and dynamics. But slowly, tentatively, they found a rhythm. They talked about neutral topics: Jake's upcoming game against their rival school, Lily's college applications, Elena's students at the community college. Marcus shared stories about his work, carefully avoiding any hint of self-aggrandizement, focusing instead on the people he worked with and the challenges of changing established practices. At one point, Lily asked about Marcus's childhood, a topic he'd always avoided. But looking around the table at these people who were slowly, carefully allowing him back into their orbit, he decided to be honest. "My father was an angry drunk," Marcus said quietly. "He worked in the mills when there was work, drank when there wasn't. My mother tried to shield us from it. I had 2 younger sisters. But there's only so much you can do. When I was 16, he took off. Just left one day and never came back. My mother worked herself to death trying to keep us fed and housed. She died when I was 22. Elena's expression softened with understanding. "You never told me most of that." "I was ashamed," Marcus admitted. "I wanted to be different from him, to prove I could be successful and stable. But I ended up repeating the same pattern, abandoning my family when they needed me. I became the thing I was trying so hard not to be." "No," Jake said, surprising everyone. "You came back. He never did. That makes you different." The words were a small grace, but Marcus felt them settle in his chest like a gift. As winter deepened and Christmas approached, Marcus wondered if he'd be included in their celebrations. He didn't dare ask, didn't want to presume or pressure them. But on Christmas Eve, Lily texted, "Mom says you can come by tomorrow afternoon if you want, just for a bit." Marcus arrived at 2:00, bearing gifts he'd agonized over, thoughtful but not extravagant, showing that he'd been paying attention without trying to buy their affection. A rare book on forest ecosystems for Lily. High-end basketball shoes for Jake, in the brand he'd mentioned liking. For Elena, a leather-bound journal and a donation made in her name to the literacy program at her college. The afternoon was tentative but warm. They exchanged gifts, shared a meal that Jake had helped Elena prepare, and talked about their plans for the new year. Marcus felt the weight of what he'd missed. 18 Christmases, 18 sets of traditions and memories he'd never be part of. But he also felt gratitude for this one afternoon, this small window into the family he'd lost. As he prepared to leave, Elena stopped him. "Marcus, wait. I have something for you." She handed him a small, wrapped box. Inside was a photograph, the one picture that had been taken at the hospital right after Jake was born. Marcus stared at it, seeing himself young and terrified and hopeful, holding his newborn son while Elena smiled tiredly from the hospital bed. He'd never seen this photo before, hadn't known it existed. "I kept it," Elena said softly. "Even when I was so angry I couldn't look at pictures of us, I kept this one. Because for that one day, you were there. You were present and loving, and everything a father should be. I wanted to remember that person existed, even if he didn't stay." Marcus couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the gesture and what it represented. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that there had been good moments, that he'd been more than just the man who left. Spring arrived slowly in Maine, the snow melting to reveal the first tentative signs of new growth. Marcus had been back in Pine Haven for 6 months now, longer than he'd initially planned. He'd expected to stay a few weeks at most, but something had shifted. The pull of Seattle, of his old life, had weakened. What was there to go back to? An empty apartment, a company that now ran itself, colleagues who respected his work but didn't really know him. Here he had the beginning of something real, not a restoration of what he'd lost. That was impossible. But the construction of something new. A relationship with his children built on honesty rather than obligation. A cautious detente with Elena that was slowly, almost imperceptibly, warming into something that might eventually be friendship. He'd rented a small house on the edge of town, furnished it simply, and started thinking about this as a permanent move rather than a temporary visit. Jake was skeptical, but not entirely opposed. "You're really staying?" he'd asked. "If that's okay with you," Marcus had replied. "I'm not trying to intrude or force myself into your life, but I'd like to be around, to be available if you need anything." "I'll think about it," Jake had said, which was better than an outright rejection. Lily was more direct. "If you stay, you have to actually commit. No halfway measures, no running when things get hard. We've had enough of that." "I'm done running," Marcus had promised. One afternoon in April, Marcus was working in his yard when Elena wheeled up the driveway. He was surprised. She'd never visited his new place before, had maintained a careful distance despite their slowly improving relationship. "I need to talk to you," she said without preamble. Marcus wiped his dirty hands on his jeans and sat on the porch steps so they'd be at eye level. "What's on your mind?" Elena took a breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us, about what happened, about where we are now. And I've realized something. I need to let go of the anger completely, not just pretend I have. I've been holding on to it as a kind of shield, protecting myself from being hurt again. But it's exhausting, and it's not fair to you or me or the kids." "Elena." "Let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I'm not saying I can forget what happened or that everything is suddenly fine. The pain and damage are still there. But I'm choosing to release the anger because it's not serving anyone. I'm choosing to see you as who you are now. Someone who made terrible mistakes but is genuinely trying to make amends, rather than only seeing you as the person who hurt me." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know, and I wanted to tell you that I'm grateful you came back. Not for me, but for Jake and Lily. They needed this, even if they didn't know it. They needed to see you as a real, flawed person, rather than just an absence in their lives." They talked for over an hour, sitting in Marcus's modest yard as the afternoon sun slanted through the trees. They discussed Robert, and Elena shared stories about their marriage, not to hurt Marcus, but to help him understand the life she'd built. Robert had been steady and kind, a good partner and father figure. But he hadn't been perfect either. He'd struggled with insecurity, worried that he could never fully replace Marcus in Elena's heart. He'd been jealous sometimes of the financial support Marcus provided, feeling inadequate in comparison. "I loved him," Elena said simply, "but it was different from what we had." Robert and I were partners who chose each other after we'd both been hurt and knew what we needed. You and I were young and passionate and thought love could overcome anything. Both relationships were real and valuable, just in different ways. I'm glad you had him, Marcus said, and meant it. I'm glad you weren't alone. As Elena prepared to leave, she hesitated. There's something else. Jake's graduation is in 6 weeks. He wants you there. Both he and Lily do. They want you in the family section, not hiding in the back. The invitation was huge, a symbol of acceptance that Marcus had barely dared hope for. Are you okay with that? Yes, Elena said. I am. Graduation day arrived warm and sunny, the kind of perfect June day that made everything feel possible. Marcus sat in the family section with Elena, Lily, and several of Elena's close friends, the people who'd been there for her through everything. He felt out of place at first, aware that he was the newcomer in a group that had history and shared experiences. But when Jake walked across the stage to receive his diploma, when he looked into the crowd and his eyes found Marcus, and he smiled. A real, genuine smile. Something inside Marcus healed. Not completely, never completely. The scars of his choices would always be there. But in that moment, he felt a glimmer of redemption. At the graduation party afterward, held in Elena's backyard, Marcus found himself surrounded by people who were curious about him. They were polite, but assessing, clearly protective of Elena and the kids. He understood their wariness and didn't try to overcome it with charm or excuses. He simply answered their questions honestly, acknowledged his failures, and let his presence speak for itself. Late in the evening, as the party was winding down, Jake approached Marcus. Hey, can we talk for a minute? They walked to the edge of the property, where the yard gave way to forest. For a long moment, Jake just stood there looking at the trees. Finally, he spoke. I was angry at you for so long. When I was a kid, I used to make up stories about why you left. I told myself you were a secret agent, or an explorer, or someone who had to leave to save the world. Anything to avoid the truth that you just didn't want to be here. Marcus absorbed the pain in those words silently. But then, when I got older, I started to understand that people are complicated, that you could love us and still make terrible choices, that you could be weak in some ways and strong in others. Robert taught me that. He talked to me about forgiveness, about how holding on to anger only hurts you in the end. He sounds like he was a wise man, Marcus said quietly. He was, and he's the one I'll always think of as my dad. The one who was there for everything that mattered. But... Jake paused, his voice thick with emotion. But I'm glad you came back. I'm glad I got the chance to know you, to understand who you are beyond the absence. And I wanted you to know that I don't hate you. I'm not sure what I feel exactly, but it's not hate. That's more than I deserve, Marcus said, his own voice breaking. Maybe, but it's what I'm offering anyway. They stood in companionable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the party behind them and the forest around them. Eventually, they walked back together, not father and son in the traditional sense, but two people who shared blood and were learning to share something more. Summer passed in a blur of small moments that Marcus treasured. He helped Lily prepare for college, driving her to campus for orientation and listening to her excited plans for her future. He attended more of Jake's basketball games, now sitting with the family rather than hiding in the back. He had dinner with Elena once a week, their conversations gradually expanding beyond the safe topics to include deeper discussions about their lives, their regrets, their hopes. The relationship between Marcus and Elena evolved into something neither of them could quite define. They weren't romantic. Too much had happened for that. But they weren't just cordial acquaintances either. There was an ease between them born of shared history and hard-won understanding. They knew each other's wounds and weaknesses, and there was a strange comfort in that knowledge. One evening in late August, as they sat on Elena's porch watching the sunset, she said. "I never thought we'd get here. When you first showed up, I wanted you to leave and never come back. I was so afraid of you disrupting the life I'd built." "Did I disrupt it?" Marcus asked. "Yes," Elena said with a slight smile. "But maybe in a way we all needed. The kids have closure now. They have answers to questions they've been carrying. And She trailed off, searching for words. "I have peace. Real peace, not just the appearance of it. I've made my peace with our past, with what we were and what we became. I couldn't have done that if you hadn't come back." "I'm glad I came back," Marcus said. "Even though it was terrifying and painful, and I didn't know if anyone would even talk to me. I'm glad." As Lily prepared to leave for college, the family, Marcus now included in that definition, gathered for a farewell dinner. It was bittersweet, everyone aware that this marked the end of an era. Both kids would be away now, Jake at his university, Lily starting her undergraduate studies. Elena would be alone in the house for the first time since the divorce. "I'll be fine," she insisted when Marcus voiced concern. "I've been alone before. I know how to take care of myself." "I know you do," Marcus said. "But you don't have to be alone if you don't want to be. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." It wasn't a romantic declaration or a request for reconciliation. It was simply a statement of fact. He was present, available, a resource if she needed one. Elena nodded, acknowledging the offer without necessarily accepting it. After Lily left, Marcus found himself settling even more deeply into life in Pine Haven. He split his time between managing his company remotely. The sustainable forestry initiatives were gaining traction and actually proving profitable, and volunteering with local conservation efforts. Lily had inspired him to really understand the forests he'd spent his career harvesting, and he discovered a passion for preservation that he'd never known existed. He and Elena fell into a comfortable routine. They had dinner together twice a week, sometimes at her place, sometimes at his. They attended community events together, not as a couple but as friends who enjoyed each other's company. People in town gradually accepted Marcus's presence, though he was always aware of being the newcomer, the one who had to prove himself. Winter returned, and with it came Jake's winter break. On Christmas morning, Marcus arrived at Elena's house. It was tradition now, 1 year into his return, and found himself unexpectedly emotional. Last Christmas, he'd been a tentative visitor, unsure of his welcome. This year, he walked in to find a stocking hanging with his name on it, a small but significant gesture. "Don't get too excited," Lily teased. "It's mostly just practical stuff. Mom picked it out." But Marcus saw Elena's small smile and knew the gesture meant something deeper. He was part of the family now, however unconventionally, part of the fabric of their lives. That evening, after the kids had gone to their respective rooms, Marcus helped Elena clean up the kitchen. They worked in comfortable silence, a familiarity that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. "Thank you," Marcus said suddenly, "for letting me back in, for giving me a chance to be part of this." Elena paused, drying a dish. "I didn't do it just for you. I did it for all of us." The kids needed closure, and honestly, so did I. Carrying anger and resentment for 18 years was exhausting. Still, you could have refused, kept me out. You would have been justified. Maybe, but I've learned that life is too short and too unpredictable to hold on to grudges. My accident taught me that. One moment everything is normal. The next your whole world changes. I didn't want to waste whatever time I have left being bitter. Marcus set down the plate he was washing and turned to face her. "Elena, I need to say something, and I need you to just listen, okay?" She nodded, wariness entering her expression. "I know we can't go back. I know too much has happened. Too much time has passed. I'm not asking for that. But I need you to know that loving you was the realest thing I ever did. Leaving you was the worst mistake I ever made. And being here now, being part of your life again, even in this limited way, it's a gift I never thought I'd receive. You've given me more grace than I deserve, and I'm grateful every single day. Elena's eyes glistened with tears. Marcus, I'm not done. I also need you to know that I see you, really see you. I see how strong you are, how you've built this incredible life despite everything. I see your kindness and your wisdom and your courage, and I'm in awe of you. I always was, but I was too selfish and blind to appreciate it then. I appreciate it now. For a long moment, Elena didn't speak. Then, quietly, she said, "You've changed. You're not the man who left 18 years ago." "I hope not. That man was a coward who ran from the things that mattered." "And this man?" Elena asked. "Who is he?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Someone who's trying to be better. Someone who's learning that success isn't measured in money or power, but in showing up for people you care about. Someone who's still making mistakes, but at least facing them instead of running." Elena wheeled closer, looking up at him intently. "I forgive you," she said simply. "I don't know when it happened exactly, somewhere over the past year. But I forgive you for leaving, for the years of absence, for everything. I'm choosing to let go of the hurt and move forward." Marcus felt something break open in his chest, relief and grief and gratitude all mixed together. "I don't know if I deserve that." "Probably not," Elena said with a slight smile. "But I'm not giving it to you for your sake. I'm giving it for mine. I'm tired of carrying that weight." They embraced then, carefully, Elena reaching up from her chair while Marcus bent down. It wasn't romantic, but it was intimate. Two people who'd shared a life, destroyed it, and somehow found their way to something like peace. The years that followed were marked by slow, steady growth. Jake graduated from college and got drafted by a professional basketball team, achieving the dream he'd worked toward his whole life. Marcus attended every home game he could, proudly watching his son excel. Lily completed her undergraduate degree and immediately enrolled in a graduate program in environmental science, her passion for conservation burning even brighter. Marcus's company became a leader in sustainable forestry, proof that environmental responsibility and profitability could coexist. Lily consulted on several projects, and Marcus loved working with her, seeing how her young, innovative ideas challenged his established practices. Elena continued teaching, beloved by her students for her dedication and insight. She published a book about adapting to disability, sharing her experiences with honesty and humor. Marcus attended her book launch, bursting with pride as she spoke to the packed room about resilience and reinvention. And through it all, Marcus and Elena maintained their unusual friendship. They were family, but not in any traditional sense. They were two people bound by history and children and hard-won understanding, who chose to be part of each other's lives not out of obligation, but genuine care. 5 years after Marcus's return, on a crisp autumn evening, they sat on Elena's porch watching the sunset. It had become their ritual, these quiet evenings where they simply existed together, comfortable in silence or conversation. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked suddenly. "Coming back, I mean. You gave up your life in Seattle, your position there. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed away?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I think about it, but I don't regret it. Everything I thought I had there was empty. Success without meaning, money without purpose. Here, I have something real. Maybe not what I lost 18 years ago, but something valuable nonetheless." "What do you have?" Elena asked curiously. "A relationship with my kids that's honest, even if it's not traditional. Work that matters beyond profit margins. A community I'm part of, not just someone who takes from it. And you." He glanced at her. "I have you as a friend, which is more than I ever hoped for." Elena smiled, the expression carrying traces of the young woman Marcus had fallen in love with decades ago. "You're right. It's not what we lost, but it is something worth having." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky painted itself in shades of orange and purple. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the town settling in for evening. Cars passing, distant laughter, the wind through the trees. "I'm glad you came back," Elena said quietly. "I never thought I'd say that, but I am. You needed it, but I think maybe we all did. To face the past, to understand it, to move beyond it." "I'm glad I came back too," Marcus replied, even though it was terrifying. Especially because it was terrifying. As darkness fell, Marcus stood to leave. It was their pattern. Evenings together, but separate homes, separate lives that intersected by choice rather than necessity. He paused at the door, looking back at Elena silhouetted against the warm light of her home. "Same time next week?" he asked. "Same time next week," she confirmed. It was a small promise, but it meant everything. The consistency of showing up, of being present, of choosing connection over isolation. Marcus drove home through the quiet streets of Pinehaven, feeling something he hadn't felt in decades. Contentment. Not happiness exactly, which seemed too simple for the complexity of his life, but a deep sense of being where he was supposed to be. The following spring brought unexpected news. Jake called with excitement in his voice. He was getting married. He'd been dating Sophia, a physical therapist he'd met through the team, for 2 years, and they were planning a summer wedding. "I want you there," Jake said. "Not just as a guest, but in the family section. Is that okay?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Are you sure? I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable." "I'm sure. You're my father, and you've been here for the past 5 years. You've earned your place." The wedding was beautiful, held in a meadow outside of town with the mountains rising in the background. Marcus watched his son marry the woman he loved, surrounded by friends and family who'd been part of Jake's entire journey. Robert Thompson's parents were there too, elderly, but proud, clearly considering Jake as much their grandson as if he'd been blood. During the reception, Marcus found himself talking with Robert's father, Thomas. The old man studied him with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're the one who came back," Thomas said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. Robert told me about you before he died. Said you'd made mistakes, but you were trying to fix them. He respected that, even though it couldn't have been easy for him having you around." Marcus felt a pang of guilt. I never wanted to cause him discomfort. He was a good man, better than me. He was there when I wasn't. "He was a good man," Thomas agreed. "But you're not so bad yourself. Takes courage to face what you've done, to try to make amends even when you know you can't undo the damage." Robert understood that. He told me once that he hoped you'd find peace, that you'd be able to build something with your kids. He wanted that for them, even if it meant sharing their affection. The generosity of that sentiment, from a man Marcus had never met, but whose legacy he lived in the shadow of, was almost overwhelming. I wish I could have thanked him. "You can thank him by continuing to show up," Thomas said simply. "By being the father, my son helped your children see they deserved. That's the best thanks you could give." As the evening progressed, Marcus danced with Lily, who'd been Sophia's maid of honor. She'd grown into a confident young woman, nearly finished with her graduate degree, already being recruited by major environmental organizations. "You know," she said as they swayed to the music, "when you first came back, I hated the idea of you. I thought you'd ruin everything, bring back all the pain Mom had finally gotten past." "I almost did," Marcus admitted. "But you didn't. You stayed, and you did the work. You showed up even when it was awkward and uncomfortable, and somehow you became part of our lives in a way that didn't erase Robert, but didn't diminish you either. Your mother taught me that was possible. She showed me grace I didn't earn. Lily smiled. She's good at that, but you did earn it, eventually. By being consistent, by respecting boundaries, by not demanding more than we could give. That mattered. Later, Marcus found Elena sitting at one of the tables, watching the celebration with a contented expression. He sat beside her, and for a while, they just observed together. Their son dancing with his new wife, Lily laughing with friends, the community they were part of celebrating new beginnings. We made that, Elena said softly, gesturing toward Jake. For all the mistakes and pain, we made something beautiful. You made him, Marcus corrected. You raised him to be the man he is. We both contributed, Elena insisted. Your absence taught him things too. Self-reliance, the importance of showing up, how to forgive. Not the lessons you intended to teach, but lessons nonetheless. Marcus took her hand, a gesture that had become comfortable over the years. Thank you for letting me be here. For this, for all of it. Elena squeezed his hand. Thank you for coming back. For having the courage to face what you'd done and try to make it better. The summer faded into fall, and with it came more milestones. Lily accepted a position with a major conservation organization, heading a project that would work with logging companies, including Marcus's, to develop sustainable practices. Father and daughter would be colleagues, an irony neither of them missed. Just so we're clear, Lily said at their first official meeting, I'm not going easy on you because you're my father. If your company isn't meeting standards, I'll call it out. I wouldn't want it any other way, Marcus replied, pride evident in his voice. Working together revealed new dimensions of their relationship. Marcus saw his daughter's brilliance and dedication firsthand, watched her challenge established practices and push for innovations that sometimes made him uncomfortable. But he'd learned to be uncomfortable, learned that growth only came from being willing to change. Their arguments were passionate, but respectful, and Marcus found himself grateful for every heated debate about reforestation rates or biodiversity corridors. These were the conversations he'd missed during her childhood. The chance to see her mind work, to witness her passion, to be challenged and changed by her perspective. One evening, after a particularly intense negotiation session, Lily lingered as others filed out of the conference room. You know, she said, 5 years ago, I never would have believed I'd be working with you, that we'd be on the same team, fighting for the same things. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have believed I'd be here at all, Marcus admitted. I thought I'd visit for a week, maybe 2, then return to Seattle and the life I'd built there. I didn't realize that life was hollow until I saw what I'd missed here. What changed? Lily asked. What made you stay? Marcus considered the question. I realized that redemption isn't about grand gestures or dramatic changes. It's about showing up, day after day, and doing the small things that build trust and connection. I realized I'd spent 18 years running from discomfort, and the only way to heal was to stop running and face it. And have you healed? Lily asked quietly. Some, Marcus said honestly. I don't think you ever fully heal from the kind of damage I caused. The scars are always there, but I've learned to live with them, to let them remind me of what matters without letting them define everything I am. Lily nodded, understanding in her eyes. For what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed. I'm glad I got to know you as something other than just the guy who left. As autumn deepened into winter, Elena began experiencing health issues. Nothing catastrophic, but concerning enough that her doctors ordered a series of tests. Marcus found himself in the strange position of wanting to be there for her, but uncertain of his right to intrude on something so personal. It was Jake who called him. Mom's scared, even though she won't admit it. She could use the support if you're willing to give it. Of course, Marcus said immediately. Whatever she needs. He drove Elena to her appointments, sat with her during the long waits, held her hand when the anxiety became overwhelming. The tests came back showing early signs of heart disease, manageable with medication and lifestyle changes, but still frightening. "I survived a car accident that should have killed me," Elena said one evening, her voice shaky. "I learned to live in this chair, adapted my entire life, and now my heart is betraying me. It feels unfair." "It is unfair," Marcus agreed. "You've been through more than anyone should have to endure." "I'm tired, Marcus," Elena admitted, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm tired of fighting, of adapting, of being strong. Sometimes I just want to rest." Marcus pulled her close, letting her cry against his shoulder. "Then rest. You don't have to be strong every moment. Let other people carry the weight for a while. Let me carry some of it." Over the following months, Marcus became Elena's primary support system. He took her to cardiac rehab appointments, helped her adjust to new medications, researched heart-healthy recipes, and cooked meals they shared. It wasn't romantic. Their relationship had long since settled into something beyond and different from romance. But it was intimate in the way that caring for someone's vulnerability always is. The kids noticed and approved. "You're doing what Robert did," Jake observed one day. "Being there when it matters." "I'm trying to be what I should have been from the beginning," Marcus replied. "Maybe," Jake said. "Or maybe you're being what we need now, which is different, but just as valuable." Spring arrived again, marking 6 years since Marcus's return to Pine Haven. The town was preparing for its annual spring festival, and Marcus found himself on the planning committee, something that would have been unthinkable when he first arrived, when he was still an outsider trying to earn acceptance. Elena's health had stabilized with treatment, and she'd regained much of her energy. On the day of the festival, Marcus pushed her wheelchair through the crowded streets, both of them stopping frequently to talk with friends and neighbors. "Look at us," Elena said with a laugh. 6 years ago, you couldn't walk down this street without people whispering. Now you're on the festival committee." "Time and consistency," Marcus said. "Turns out if you show up long enough and actually contribute, people eventually accept you." "Or maybe you've changed enough that there's something worth accepting," Elena suggested. They stopped at a booth run by Lily's organization, where she was enthusiastically explaining conservation initiatives to anyone who would listen. Seeing her passion and dedication filled Marcus with a pride so intense it was almost painful. Pride mixed with regret for all the moments of her growing up he'd missed, but also gratitude that he got to witness this version of her. That evening, after the festival had ended and the crowds had dispersed, Marcus and Elena sat in their usual spot on her porch. The spring air was soft and warm, carrying the scent of flowering trees. "I've been thinking about something," Elena said slowly. "About us, and what we are to each other." Marcus felt a flutter of anxiety. "Okay. We're not married. We're not even really together in any traditional sense. But we're not just friends either. We're something else. Something I don't have a name for." "Does it need a name?" Marcus asked. "Maybe not. Maybe it's enough that we know what it is. Two people who share a history, who hurt each other and healed each other, who choose to be in each other's lives because it makes both lives better." "I like that definition," Marcus said softly. Elena turned her chair to face him directly. "I want you to know something, Marcus. I don't regret our marriage, even though it ended badly. We made 2 incredible children. We had some beautiful years before things fell apart. And somehow, impossibly, we've built something meaningful from the ruins. That's not nothing." "It's everything," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's more than I ever dared hope for." They sat together as the stars emerged one by one, 2 people who'd traveled such different roads only to end up back in each other's orbit, changed but still connected by bonds that time and pain hadn't completely severed. The years continued to pass, marked by both joy and sorrow, triumphs and setbacks. Jake and Sophia had a daughter, making Marcus a grandfather, a role he embraced with the dedication he'd failed to show as a father, determined to be present for this grandchild in ways he hadn't been for his own children. Lily got engaged to a fellow environmental scientist, and their wedding was a celebration of both love and shared mission, filled with flowers native to the region and vows that included promises to protect the natural world they both loved. Marcus's company continued to evolve, becoming a model for sustainable forestry that other organizations studied and emulated. He took no personal credit, always pointing to Lily and her colleagues, whose expertise had transformed his understanding of the industry. Elena published a second book, this one about forgiveness and second chances, drawing on her own experiences without explicitly naming Marcus, but clearly referencing their journey. He read it in one sitting, crying at her honesty about the pain he'd caused, but also at her generosity in acknowledging his attempts at redemption. Through it all, Marcus and Elena remained constants in each other's lives, not bound by obligation or legal ties, but by choice. They chose each other, day after day, in ways that honored both their past and their present. On a cool October evening, nearly 8 years after Marcus's return, they sat together watching the sun set over the mountains. Elena's health had been declining gradually, her heart condition worsening despite treatment, and they both knew their time together was growing shorter. "I need to tell you something," Elena said, her voice soft but clear. "I love you. Not the way I did when we were young and thought love could conquer anything. But I love you for who you've become, for the work you've done to be better, for the way you've shown up even when it was hard." Marcus felt tears stream down his face. "I love you too. I've never stopped, even when I had no right to, even when that love was selfish and hollow. But it's different now. Deeper. Based on actually knowing each other, scars and all." "Good," Elena said, taking his hand. "I wanted you to know that. I wanted you to understand that you found your way back, not just to Pine Haven or to the kids, but to me. In a different form, in a different way, but you found your way back." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened. Two people who'd traveled impossibly long roads, separately and together, to arrive at this moment of peace. Elena passed away quietly in her sleep 3 months later, her heart finally giving out after years of fighting. Marcus was with her at the end, along with Jake and Lily, holding her hand as she slipped away. Her last words were about how proud she was of their children, how grateful she was for the family they'd built despite everything. The funeral was packed with people whose lives Elena had touched. Students, colleagues, friends, community members who'd been inspired by her resilience and grace. Marcus sat with his children, grieving the loss of the woman who'd defined so much of his life, even in her absence. At the reception afterward, people shared stories about Elena, her kindness, her humor, her strength, her refusal to be defined by her limitations. Again and again, Marcus heard variations of the same theme. Elena had taught them that healing was possible, that you could survive unimaginable challenges and still find joy. Thomas Thompson, Robert's father, now quite elderly, approached Marcus. "She forgave you, you know. Completely, truly forgave you. Robert would be glad about that. He always said forgiveness was the only path to real peace." "She gave me more grace than I deserved," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "Maybe, but you also did the work to earn it. You showed up, you changed, you became someone worthy of that grace. That matters." In the months that followed, Marcus found himself adrift. Elena had been his anchor, the person he checked in with, shared meals with, built his life around. Without her, even surrounded by his children and grandchild, he felt unmoored. Jake noticed his struggle. "You okay, Dad?" The word, Dad, still caught Marcus off guard, even after years. Jake had started using it about 3 years ago, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. It wasn't a replacement for Robert, just an acknowledgement that Marcus had earned a place in that role too. "I miss her," Marcus admitted. "I miss knowing she's there, that we'll have our evening talks. I miss having someone who knew me before, who remembered who I was, and who I became." "We remember," Lily said gently. She'd joined them, creating a small family conference. "We remember the man who left and the man who came back. We remember all the years in between. You're not alone in carrying that history." "What do I do now?" Marcus asked, feeling lost. "I came back for her for all of you. Now she's gone, and I don't know what my purpose is." Jake and Lily exchanged glances, then Jake spoke. "Your purpose is the same as it's always been. To be present. To show up for us. For your granddaughter. For the work you're doing. Mom's death doesn't change that." "He's right," Lily added. "You've built a life here. It's not dependent on Mom being alive. It's yours. Something you created through years of consistent effort. Don't throw that away because you're grieving." They were right, of course. Over the next year, Marcus slowly found his footing again. He spent more time with his granddaughter, teaching her about the forests and instilling in her the respect for nature that Lily had taught him. He continued his work, pushing for even more aggressive conservation measures, treating it as a legacy for future generations. He also started volunteering at the community college where Elena had taught, funding a scholarship in her name and occasionally guest lecturing about sustainable business practices. It was a way to honor her memory while contributing to the community that had eventually accepted him. On what would have been Elena's 65th birthday, Marcus organized a memorial event, a tree planting ceremony in the town park. Hundreds of people showed up, each planting a sapling in her honor, creating a grove that would grow and thrive long after they were all gone. As Marcus planted his own tree, a white pine, Elena's favorite, he felt a sense of completion. Not closure exactly, because the story never really ends, but a sense that he'd done what he came back to do. He'd faced his failures, made amends where possible, and built something meaningful from the wreckage of his choices. That evening, he sat alone on what had been Elena's porch, now part of Jake's house since he'd inherited the property. The view was the same. Mountains in the distance, forest all around, the town spread out below. But everything was different too. "I made it back," Marcus said softly, speaking to Elena's memory. "It took 18 years, and I lost so much along the way. But I made it back. I hope that counts for something. I hope you're proud of who I became, even if I could never undo who I was." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying no answers but offering a kind of peace nonetheless. Marcus sat there until full darkness fell, remembering everything. The mistakes and the redemption. The pain and the healing. The family lost and partially reclaimed. He'd come back to Pine Haven expecting rejection. Maybe deserving it. Instead, he'd found something he never anticipated. Not forgiveness exactly, not absolution, but acceptance. Acceptance of his flawed humanity, his genuine attempts to be better, his commitment to showing up even when it was uncomfortable. The Alpha King had returned after 18 years to see his ex Luna, and he'd frozen at what he saw, not because of her wheelchair or the life she'd built without him, but because he'd seen the truth of what his choices had cost. That moment of recognition, of truly seeing the damage he'd caused, had changed everything. Now, years later, Marcus understood that coming back wasn't about reclaiming what he'd lost. It was about honoring it by becoming someone worthy of the grace he'd been offered. It was about showing his children that people could change, that mistakes didn't have to define everything, that showing up mattered even when, especially when, it was hard. As he finally stood to leave, Marcus looked up at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, he liked to imagine Elena watching, perhaps with Robert beside her, both of them nodding in approval at the life he'd built from the ruins of their shared past. He'd never be the father he should have been from the start. He'd never reclaim those lost 18 years. But he'd become something else. A flawed man who'd faced his failures and fought to be better. Who'd earned his place in his children's lives through consistency and genuine change. Who'd learned that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about building a better future. And in the end, perhaps that was enough.